We are in Philippians 1, verse 22, reading through chapter 2, verse 4 today. If you have a Bible and like to follow along, or a Bible app, or even just look on the screen, let's follow along together as I read this with us today. It starts with saying, "Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Then, whether I come and see you or only hear about you in my absence, I will know that you stand firm in one spirit, striving together as one for the faith of the gospel without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. This is a sign to them that they will be destroyed and that you will be saved, and that by God. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. Since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had and now hear that I still have. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit, one in mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each to the interest of others." It was a couple months ago I saw an article that had a headline, and it said, "The Divided States of America." No surprise. I think I've seen a lot of headlines that looked very similar to that over the past couple of years, but especially here of late, as it feels like through Supreme Court decisions and other cycles through, that just seems to highlight the crevices between us, the gaps in between people, and the further and further people seem to get from each other. I have not personally, thankfully, I'm thankful to the Lord for that, didn't lose any close friends through the midst of everything the last couple of years, but I have never in my life talked to so many people at one point in ministry, friends in ministry, you guys in our church, that said, I have lost close friendships, I have had relationships severed in my family. There's just never been a time that I have been a part of in ministry where I've felt through so many people, and even myself in other ways, just the division and the brokenness and the hurt and the pain that's come through such fissures in between people's relationships and in their life. I was listening to a pastor talk about a book that was written by a correspondent that ended up spending time on the battlefield, and I'm not sure which wars it was. I didn't read the book, just listening to him talk about this, but he went and interviewed soldiers for an extended period of time, several months, and interviewed soldiers, not in America, but in some wars that were taking place around the world. And he was curious to find how could a soldier, and what would cause him or her to leave home, leave family, leave safety, leave all those things to go and fight on the battlefield for their country against another country. And sometimes we think those answers seem obvious, but he was just really intrigued by how does that happen and what motivates them to give so much in a battle sometimes that maybe not be theirs, but it's for their country. And he said he realized that it was what was motivating them from their people in the chain of command in their own country, talking about the things that they hold. It was almost nearly the same for any country army that he met with, that they would talk about what they held dear, what the people that they were fighting against did not, what they were fighting against would protect those things, would push back those things. And he just said a lot of it came down to the way that they were motivated and challenged and just charged with the dignity and the morality of what they were doing in the face of whatever it was they were protecting for their nation. It was different for each person depending on what nation they come from, but it was kind of the same motivation. Here's why I share this, though. It's really interesting. He made a comment in his book, because he is an American. He says, what I find fascinating now is the rhetoric that enables soldiers to fight to this degree all around the world, different countries, different places. He says the rhetoric that enabled these soldiers to fight has now become the public dialogue between each of us in America. He said he recognized the tone and the way that people spoke and how they spoke out of a place of this needs to be protected and you need to be against people that are like this. And he says, I've just noticed this is the way our dialogue happens now on the news or in social media. You know, you probably have seen some of the things that I've seen. Netflix put out one of the most popular ones, but there's been several others that just talk about
the issues that social media has created. Their famous one, Social Dilemma, which was produced by and written by people that were early on starters of things like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and how a lot of them don't engage in those platforms or have severe limits on their phones and computers to do it, and virtually none of them let their children do it. That's interesting. I've quoted that to my kids a few times. And it's not just because, there could be bad content that's placed on there. Of course we know that. But these people, men and women, were concerned about how they were designed and designed for, to bring constant attention and attraction back to the platform, number one. One of the guys said on there that was the most profound thing for me. I just kind of sat, I need to listen to that again. He just said, listen, if you don't pay for something, you're the product. Right? If you're not paying, you're the product. And he says that each user on these platforms is the product. We are the product of promotion and advertisement to spend money, to spend billions, but the product is us or our attention. But even beyond our attention, our eyes, our hearts, what we're interested in, what we want, what we're willing to pay for, what we want more of. And then that combined with the algorithms that it's designed to continue to feed what you want in more and more ways, adding more and more to that, getting less of what you don't want and what you don't know or you don't understand, feeding it. What it's created, as we all know, this extreme polarization. Have you noticed, Jerry, and I've talked about this over the last year, the superlatives that's used by politicians nearly all the time now. This is never so-and-so and so. It's never been so-and-so. It's always these extremes. And I think part of that, sometimes people have an agenda and they really believe that, but I think part of that is to rise above the noise of everything that's out there now. We have to create a sense of urgency, a sense of angst and almost rage. If we don't do something, this is going to be the worst tragedy that's ever happened. Since 4 months ago, when I heard about the other tragedy, it would be the worst thing in the world. But everybody has to rise up to get above all of the noise. But what it's doing is creating just great gaps in between situations and creating great polarization, as I think we all know. But it's not just out there. It's what we see happening in our homes and family relationships, people we work with, friendships, and even in churches. So, some here today, you've been on the receiving end of some of that pushback and harsh maybe language or just difficulties in relationships that people have pushed you out because of something that you've said or something you believe in. While at the same time, there's probably many here today that you've been on the initiating end of pushing that. And so I'm kind of trying to speak to all of us today, and thankfully it's not me, but it's what the scripture has to tell us, and has a lot of great things here in Philippians to really challenge us, because what Paul is writing about in this particular section in the book of Philippians is the importance of unity, and actually the connection between unity and joy, because it's a big one. So we've been talking for several weeks about how to get out of a place in our life of languishing where we feel like we're going nowhere, where a lot of people feel that way these days. How do we do that? And we've been looking at a lot of different ways to have this joy and defiant joy, but unity is a big, big part of this. Many people have said, I don't know if you've heard this, but there's been a few people that have written on this, especially even early on, that COVID wasn't so much when it came along that it revealed or it caused a lot of new problems, but it just kind of revealed a lot that was hidden below the surface. It was a great revealer. I heard one writer I love say that it just kind of became the megaphone for all the things we were already saying, but it became an easier way to say it louder and to create more attention and to get more following or rejection of that. And so if that's really true, then it revealed things that were differences that we had that maybe we hadn't spoken about, or maybe even we didn't even think about. But even more, it revealed, I think in a lot of ways, what was most important to many people. Their closest in beliefs and values became to the surface, which is why it may be that you or someone you know said, we've been family for all these years, and yet because of blank, this just doesn't work anymore. We've been friends since high school, and we've done a lot together, but because now you think or believe blank, I don't think it's going to work. Or I've been in church and I've worshiped with you and we worship Jesus together and we've been through tough times together, but because you believe or thought blank, all of a sudden it feels like that there was things that were more important than the things that we thought were most important.
and it's taken a lot of people by surprise. Listen, any opposing force that is coming against something or someone of greater power or greater force usually has one tactic in mind. It's what militaries and armies and people have used throughout all of history, right? It is called divide and conquer. If your enemy is bigger and greater or stronger than you, you either don't have any hope, so you turn around, or you try to find a way to divide them. And certainly the enemy has been working overtime on trying to divide us as people who follow Jesus. It is so difficult. Imagine this. Here's Paul talking about how to have unity as a church. And you are being discipled. It's really the word. It's not just a word that we have to use towards Christianity. You are being discipled every day, from algorithms and social media to just how everything functions, to find the people that think like you and attach yourself to them, to be suspicious of someone that doesn't believe the way you think. I read an article a while back that talked about where has goodwill gone? It's gone out with the rhetoric that it will never get worse, or it will never happen again, or it'll be the worst disaster in the world. When it's all superlatives, there's no room for goodwill anymore. That, we may disagree, but I still think that, we can get along, or that you've got a good heart about it. And it just seems to have been depleted. So it's really hard. 6.5 days a week that you're being programmed really away from unity and division to come in and go, okay, let's talk about how we develop this new community, this new family of believers, and not function and act like the swell and the push and the pressure of everything else in our life that's pushing us in the opposite direction. But we shall not give up. We are going to read Philippians, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to let God speak to us today. So number one, if we know that the enemy is coming to divide and conquer us, if we know that he wants to prevent unity from happening, then number one, let's recognize what division really is, or disunity, what it is, and where it comes from. Because it's really easy to think back, whether that's over the last couple of years or just the last 20 years in your life, whatever's caused separation or division in your life with friends or in situations or whatever it might be, we have a tendency to focus on the issue. See, we just disagreed over this. We had a sharp disagreement over that. And we think about the issue, we think about the disagreement, but what the Bible wants us to do is turn in on ourselves and to think, okay, wait a minute, where does all this come from? And where is it coming from inside of me? Where is it coming from the things that I can't necessarily see? And those have just become kind of representations in the physical, but really there's something deeper than that. And so Paul gives us a little bit of a clue here in chapter 2, verse 3 at the very beginning. He said, listen, if you're going to be a church, you're going to be a people. And this may be the context here in chapter 2 of the church, but this really has anything to do with where you live if you're a follower of Jesus, where you live, your home, your family, your relationships. Paul is talking about what it looks like to live as the people of God in new ways of living and new relationships. And so he says 2:3, it's very simple, but not easy to do, but very simple to understand. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition and vain conceit. Do nothing out of selfish ambition and vain conceit. Now, this vain conceit, maybe we don't really talk about it very much. It's kind of an older form. It's said vanity, or different ways it's translated. Here it was, I lost my spot. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain, or it's vain conceit. But sometimes it says in the King James Version, vain glory, which gives us a little bit more of an insight, because it actually means vainglory or empty glory, or another way to say it would be groundless self-esteem. This is really interesting. Paul is saying, do nothing out of this empty glory. And exactly what is he talking about? What does he mean, since we don't really talk like that? Well, actually, you probably do have some understanding of this. Maybe you've heard the verse before, Romans 3, verse 23, where it says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Now, what the Bible is not telling us, and don't have time to look at every single context, so you can go back and look at this, but it's not saying that we've all been trying to get to God's glory and none of us have measured up to it. It is true that we don't measure up to it, but what does it say? For all have sinned. Because before sin entered in to our existence and to our world and into our lives, We were made in God's image. Maybe you heard people say it in the Latin phrase imago Dei, made in the image of God. But part of being made in the image of God, distinct from all other creation and all other created beings, we were made in God's image, that we bore his image. In other words, we bore his glory. We bore who he was in his likeness with us. But in our sin, that broke us and severed off in our relationship with him and left us with a marred image of God, with not a perfect image of God and not a representation of his glory in every aspect because of the sin that's in our life. So it's left us, as Paul's talking about, with this now empty glory. And this is, look at what happened there in the garden, the very beginning, as the tempter comes and tempts Adam and Eve, take from the fruit. God said, don't eat from it. But I mean, come on, really? Did he really mean that? There could be some good that can come from this. So they took matters in their own hands. They saw it look good. They thought, God's probably withholding something from us. And they take and they eat it. And then it says in Genesis 3:7, the eyes of both of them were opened and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Immediately, as they took matters in their own hands, as they decided, I'm going to go my own way, make my own choices. I don't want to be, controlled or boxed in here in this situation by what God has done. It immediately changed everything. What does it say? They realized that they were naked. What exactly does that mean? Because my mind jumps back to Sunday school days, if any of you have been in Sunday school, and we had the Adam and Eve. And if you're a young boy, I'm sorry, but they're naked and then they put little fig branches over them. And you're always like, as soon as the teacher doesn't look, you strip it off and then, stop it, Mark Chester, and then put the little fig back on there. Because you're just laughing at the fact that there's two somewhat naked flannel graph pictures of these people up there. And the whole thing's kind of funny. They realized they were naked. But there's something deep to understand here. That there is all of a sudden a realization immediately when they stepped outside of God's will, what he had designed for them. As soon as they stepped out of that and began to determine life on their own, they realized they faced a huge deficit. That's what it means to be naked. All of a sudden, I'm not covered. All of a sudden, I realize all my imperfections. All of a sudden, I realize when I look at just my glory, it doesn't measure up and something needs to be covered. And so they turned and they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. And they're not adequate. They're not adequate for them and they're not adequate for us. And if you fast forward it today to look at how that relates to us, they started the first attempt at the glory clothing line. And we just continue to do it today. You know what the glory clothing line looks like? It's different for each of us. It's having that certain job or making that certain amount of money. It's having that many likes or people that follow you or speak well of you. You can find out really quick what your clothing line is by when you get hit with the opposite. In other words, if someone rejects you or says something not very nice about the way you look or the way you speak, all of a sudden you get upset because they're revealing the nakedness that you've been trying to cover. Someone, you could make all the money in the world and someone comes and says something, a little comment about you or about something about to do with finances, and you can't get it out of your head. Why? It may not even be true. You may make plenty of money, but the fact that they think that, why can't you get it out of your head? Because there's something inside of you that says, all that you're trying to cover up still just isn't enough to cover up that nakedness. That's what Paul talks about vainglory. He says you can't, if you're going to be people of unity, you can't be functioning out of this empty glory that has now become our heritage with trying to live without God. It is nearly, if at all, if you can even say it, but it is either impossible or nearly impossible to function in unity in this environment. I think about it, another way to illustrate it is, the day after Thanksgiving, right? We're all thanking each other and God, and we're just so grateful. And then we go and attack each other for the 15, screwdriver sets that are on sale for $5 less if you're the first 30 people. And it's amazing every year to watch Black Friday. It's like WWF or the cage fighting just in real life between soccer moms or two dads. They're going at it in stores. I was talking to Jerry about this and she's like, oh my gosh, I remember people were fighting
blood and like scratching each other and ripping Cabbage Patch dolls apart. Does anyone even remember Cabbage Patch dolls? Good, all of us over 40. We remember that. They're long gone now, right? And it's like people are like attacking one another at Good Friday because they might save a little bit of money. And you've seen movies and seen everything, but it's true. That is just one little picture of what it looks like really in our everyday life, right? I mean, we can laugh at that and think that's Black Friday, but come on, let's be honest. Isn't that what's going on in our hearts, like in our workplace? That's what's going on when we're not in a relationship and we want to be in one. Look out, get out of the way. Don't get in my way of what I'm trying to get to try to cover up in my life. That's why unity is nearly impossible. Every once in a while, we'll go on a hike as a family. I don't have a particular time because this has probably happened dozens of times. But we'll all drink our water on the hike, and so you get back in the car, and there's one bottle left. It's like, oh, right? And everybody's just trying to grab it. Everybody's trying to grab it. When you are at a place of deficit, it becomes really hard to live unified because you're concerned you're not going to get any more. I said this a few months ago as an illustration. It happened again this week. My kids are fighting over the cereal. When it happens, rips and cereal goes everywhere. And I'm like, no. I mean, I like to joke with them. No, that's it. The last box of Cheerios ever made. It's all over the floor. Pick every single one of them up. They'll never be made again. And I'm like, give me a break. Like, as long as there are minivans and children, there will be Cheerios. You will either find them bought in the store or you can just buy a van and pick them up in the back. Come on, anybody have a van? They're there. Ants and bugs eat everything, but Cheerios look like the day they came out of the box right there in the back of the minivan. So I've heard. But anyway, anytime you live your life and you think no more's coming, you grab and scratch and take and do whatever you can to hold on to it. And the day in that garden, which becomes represented in our lives when we live without God, we live without the everlasting, infinite supply that God is in our life in every way. And so we always feel like we're living in a deficit. And when you live in a deficit, you are scratching and clawing. That's why James 4 says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Why aren't you unified? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Right? You desire but do not have, so you kill. We don't physically kill most of the time, but we just beat people up on the way to the Cabbage Patch. Right? Or we scrape and claw, we do whatever we can to survive, to not let someone else have what we have and fear that we may lose it, or to take from them what we want. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Here's the deal. You can know all this, basically, James is saying, and even then go to God. But if you don't have a heart change, a transformation in this, you'll just go to God and ask him for prayer and ask him in prayer for things that will create more division. And he's like, that's why it doesn't even work. If you do go to God, you're just asking him to take things from other people. You're still just trying to fulfill the deficit, the glory deficit in your life in the wrong way. Something has to change. And I'm telling you today, there is hope that we can have unity. There is hope. There better be. I mean, I know so many pastor friends that are like, I am already dreading the election coming up this year, 2024. I'm just getting in a fetal position already. I've already decided, I told the council, I'm taking a sabbatical to the Virgin Islands in all of 2024, and I'll see you January 7th or 8th or 9th or whatever, whenever the new president is elected, and then I'll be back, and you guys can take care of it. Listen, why do so many pastors, they say nearly 50% right now, want to quit? Why? Because really, most of us do what we do because we really love to do it with people. And thankfully, I'm not planning to go anywhere. I don't put myself in that category. I'm thankful for what God has done. But I can understand that if you've lost friendships and family and people that you have loved and you've felt that people have just left, it's really hard to carry on. Now that may be just, let's take that from the church world into your own life. You can pretend. Come on. You can pretend your best. But when you're there at the family meal, at the family gathering, is it really more joyful that you got your way and your points across politically, or would it be better if your family was there? Is it really good that you got in the last word
about what you thought about what was going on in society or what you thought about this decision or that decision? Or would it be better that you had relationship with them and some of those things you could just trust God to? I don't know. I think the Lord really, he's designed us for a relationship. We'll get into to where you draw the line in just a second. I'll allude to that. But listen, he says, do nothing from this place of deficit. Do nothing from this place of deficit. It will only end up in more deficit. There's so many different things that cause our division and our wounds. James says this in James 3. Listen, who is wise and understanding among you? So this goes to, well, where do you draw the line? How do I decide? Because there are essentials and there are non-essentials. Listen to what James says that should guide us no matter what it is that we're discussing with somebody. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that come from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such, quote, wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Interesting, he's using the same words here, James, as Paul did. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. He's like, listen, your, quote, wisdom, if it ends up in division and envy and selfish ambition, and the fact that everyone is just not walking in deeds of humility, James is saying that's not wisdom. That doesn't come from the Lord. Don't do that. Don't allow that to become earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where these things are the prevalent things, you will find disorder and every evil practice. You know, maybe we get our way, but boy, there's a lot of disorder and a lot of evil that has come about because of it. Maybe we can take a step back and say, Lord, I'm going to have to trust you in this area, and that to stay unified with this person over something I disagree with may be more important. It may allow you to work more than just for me to get the final word or my word across. Listen, vain conceit is that empty glory. Selfish ambition means this: electioneering or an intrigue like going for office. It was always used, this word, it's interesting. It was used, Aristotle, many other people in Greek culture used it before Paul ever used it, not in a spiritual sense, but in a political sense. But it was people who ran for political office for their own gain. It was people, in other words, professional party-making people, meaning they would always gain and seek to gain followers to their side. So Paul says, what happens when you live with this empty glory? You end up just trying to get people on your side. And you know why Paul is so frustrated with division in the church particularly, or division in places where Jesus' followers are? Because we're never to get people onto our side, we're only to get them onto Jesus' side. And there was so much, I mean, it's simple, but it really is true. There was so much division that's happened over the last few years that was much more about getting people into other people's opinions and political sides than it ever was really just to come to Jesus, if we're really honest. It may have seemed like an issue that had to do with Jesus, but if we're really honest at the end of the day, it wasn't an essential thing. It was just something that we felt was very important, but wasn't an essential thing to our faith. And Jesus said, what we're trying to win people to is to the side of Christ. There is implications to that. Historically, Christianity's talked about in essentials unity, in non-essentials charity or in love, and in everything else, in non-essentials freedom, and then everything else show love. There was one group of believers in Europe several hundred years ago that took kind of that to the next level and said there are essentials, which is our faith in who Jesus is and what he came to do and how he died for our sins and that he's the only way, the truth, and the life. There's a handful of those things. We have historic creeds as Christianity. We believe in the one, God the Father and God the Son and his Spirit, right? We have these creeds, the Apostle Creeds and others that talk about the centrality of our faith. And then they said, then there's these other things, they called them ministerials, I think, as ministeriums. And they said, these are the ways that we minister to the things that are essential. But in fact, they're not essential in and of themselves, but they point to things that are essential. So they're very important, but they're still not enough to divide us. And they would say, and I would agree with some of their things, they'd say things like communion and how you take communion and maybe how you baptize and how you dedicate people. And they're very important because of what they point to, but even in and of themselves, they're not the essential thing. I remember hearing a pastor say one time, Jesus spit in the mud, rubbed it in his hands, and put it on a guy's eyes that was blind. And he said, today, if that had happened, people would have created two denominations, the Muddites and the non-Muddites, right? Like you can heal with mud or without mud, right? And we love to create those things. Sometimes they're not bad that we gather together around things that are meaningful to us, but we need to recognize the things that really are essential. And now, let me just say, I think sadly, in a lot of different churches, there was a lot of division over things that weren't essential. There's no discussion about Scripture and theology at all, just about other things that split churches. But hold on just a minute. Let's just break it down to your own life. How many right now have different relationships and people in your life that really, maybe you've cut off, maybe you've stopped talking to over things that really aren't essential? That really aren't essential. And maybe God would just speak to you today to say, maybe there's a way that you can just still maintain relationship. Maybe you need to guard yourself, protect yourself. You can't be unified with everyone that may have strong beliefs against you. But there's also a way to function and live, as James said there, that is in a place of humility that comes from the wisdom that God gives. Because your relationship with someone, if they don't know Jesus, might be the only bridge that they have. So to burn that over something that's not just Jesus may not lead to the greater good, may not lead to the greater essential. So Genesis 3, Adam responds back to God. If you remember going back to the garden now, he responds back to God. I heard you in the garden, God, when you showed up, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And God says to him, who told you that you were naked? Did you eat from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? The man replied, the woman you gave to be with me, she gave me some of the fruit from the tree and I ate. So Lord God asked the woman, what have you done? And the woman said to the serpent, the woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. So God comes to Adam and says, what did you do? And he's like, don't look at me, she's naked. Right? And she's like, don't look at me, the serpent's naked. The serpent, if they had kids, she would have said, it was little Jacob's fault, right? They didn't have kids yet. Because we're just really good at just wanting to pass the blame and shift it because we know that we're going to be caught. We know that we're going to be exposed. But this just creates this competition with us to see who is not covered the least. How can I show that I've got it together? And so it just naturally, when you have this empty glory, it just naturally leads to division. Look, I'm doing better than she is. It's really more her fault. My son, my middle child's having a birthday party this afternoon. Jerry bought all the desserts for it. Oh, man. She came home yesterday, and they're half gone. Right? It's a Genesis 3 moment. Who ate all of the desserts? Not me. It was this one, right? This one, it was that one. And this one, you only have the dog left, right? And it's up on the counter. And so it's just like everywhere else, right? We're guilty. We're guilty. But when you know that what you have is not covering you well, you just naturally point it out in others. And this is what creates division. It's what creates division. And a lot of times, I'm telling you, it comes from our fear, comes from our own pride, thinking that we're right, or we're afraid that someone may get away with something, or if they don't have that right, they don't believe that right, something else is going to happen. And a lot of times we're just not trusting the Lord enough. And the grace that God has shown us in our ignorance and in our sin and our brokenness. Let's finish with that. So where do we go from here? Is this even possible? How do we stop all the electioneering and trying to get people to our own attention? Well, listen, it is possible, but it's not possible as long as you remain naked. It's not. Genesis 3, again, the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And God called out to them, where are you? And he answered, and God says, I heard you in the garden, and Adam said, I heard you in the garden, I was afraid because I was naked. So we need a new voice, one that doesn't condemn our nakedness, but clothes us in grace. And that's why in Genesis 3:21, just a little bit later, it says the Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. And then we would see the New Testament fulfillment of that, just as we read, we'll get into it next week, in Philippians 2, where Jesus, who did not consider his equality with God as something to be grasped, but emptied himself, took off of his own, if you will, garments, laid them aside to become a servant so that we could pick up his clothing of righteousness and be clothed once again in God's glory. Not because we deserve it or we've done it, but because God loves us and he's shown us his grace. But unless you come to that place of grace, and you understand that glory that God has placed back on your life, you will not be able to walk in unity because you will constantly just be looking at everything as a competition or something that needs to be fixed or corrected. So we're not to do anything out of selfish ambition, but we're to do everything out of the grace that we've received in Christ, which is what he means by now do everything in humility. And what is it that Jesus has done for us? Philippians 2:1. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, any comfort from his love, any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion has come your way. That word if there, just like it is sometimes in English, doesn't mean if as if like maybe this happens. It means also since. Since Jesus has done these things. And what has he done? He has encouraged and comforted us. Those two words kind of come together. The first word, encouragement, actually is a form of the word that means Holy Spirit. It means to come alongside. To come alongside and provide care and refreshment and comfort. What is Paul saying? Hey, didn't Jesus come alongside you when you were messed up and you were broken and you didn't have it all together? Did he push you aside and say, when you get it all together, come on back and join me? Or did he come into fellowship with you and encourage you and lift you up and comfort you and console you in your sin and brokenness? Yes, he did. How can you do that for somebody else if you don't first know that Jesus has done it for you? And then once he's done it for you, how can you not extend that to somebody else? What else does he say? Don't you now have fellowship, this sharing in the Spirit? This is the same word koinonia that we looked at several weeks ago that we are to have with one another, this joint partnership. And he said, not only did he console you, oh, I know you've sinned and that's okay, I'm coming here. But then he gives you his Spirit to actually come and bring fellowship and relationship. It actually also means intimacy. So God didn't just kick you to the side, but he consoled you in your sin. And then he said, I'm going to come in to your life and we'll walk this out together. And then what does it say? And then remain in tenderness and compassion. That there's this affection, this heartfelt mercy, a display of concern, or in other words, compassion means a manifestation of pity. We don't want to pity anybody, but boy, we want people to pity us when we're really struggling. I want mercy. But Paul is saying here, wait a second, aren't you here because of God's grace? I mean, you were messed up, you were addicted, you were a sinner, you had all these issues, and Jesus comes alongside and consoles you and says, there's a better way to live your life. And then he gives you his Spirit and says, I'll empower you and I'll help you. And then his heart remained tender and compassionate for us in this entire journey when we still didn't get it right every time. And Paul is now saying, instead of functioning out of that empty glory, broken humanity without Jesus, how about we function from the place of what Jesus has done for us with others? Trusting in the Spirit that is working in them in the process, even if they're not have it all together, even if they're not all the way there yet, but to show them the same grace that God has shown us. Because you know the bottom line is, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. When Jesus came into my life, when I accepted him, like that was a risk for him. Is Mark really going to follow through with this? Is he really going to say no to these things? Is he really going to trust me? I mean, can I honestly say in a few years, I'm going to give that guy a church? That was a risk. And I'm not here, and I don't do anything perfect. I'm not here because of anything I've done, but simply by the grace of God. All I'm saying is, yeah, it's a risk sometimes. That when you see someone and they need to change or something needs to happen or you don't agree with what they're thinking, it's a risk sometimes, but isn't that the same risk that God has taken for you? To trust that God and his Spirit is even bigger. In fact, that's when I look back, I got to finish, but when I look back over everything with COVID, that's the thing I probably would have told people more than ever. You know, in the midst of all of this and everything that happened politically as it related to the church, can't we just trust that when Jesus said, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church, that he's the one that's in charge of it, right? He's the one that's in charge of it. So I told you before, I think, right? Someone came up to me in the midst of this and said, our churches would become a library within the next few years because we had compromised the truth. And I just simply said, I don't live with that kind of fear. And by the way, it's Jesus' church. Whatever he wants to do with it is what he'll do with it. But it's a matter of not functioning out of fear and holding on to unity. And I still love that person. I have no problems with them because they're just functioning out of fear. That's okay. That's okay. We all make mistakes. I've done it too. Can we extend the same grace? Listen, I think the only people in the world that have hope within a church, within a family, within friendships of having unity are the people who know Jesus, because we're the only ones that are tapped into the eternal source. So think about this as we get ready to close. You've been wounded. Many of us have been wounded by people. How do you have unity with people who have wounded you? You can't unless you know the person that can heal you. And then they don't hold anything on you anymore. And you can actually have a relationship with someone who's wounded you in a safe way. We can't preach every sermon every week, but you're going to have it in a way that is safe for you because you've been healed by somebody else. If someone's taken something from you, if they've taken and they've robbed you of something, whether it's something material or otherwise, how can you have unity with them unless you know someone that can replace what's been taken, which allows you to remain in unity with them? How can you have unity with someone that is just, everything they say you just disagree with and it just seems wrong, unless you go to someone that says, you've said a lot of wrong things too, and have felt a lot of wrong things towards people, but I have still loved you. And so then you can turn around and love them. Without that eternal source of Christ, I don't think this is possible. But if we will do things out of the grace that we receive from Jesus, we can actually walk in unity. And unity is a powerful, powerful thing. Powerful thing. That's why let me say this and we'll close. I said 2 weeks ago, or no, it was just last Sunday, remember Paul said, I pray for you to have a love that will grow in discernment. That will grow in discernment in your life. To know the superior things. What are the essential things to hold on to? And what are the things that maybe sometimes have caused wars and fights that were not essential? And that's just something I want the Holy Spirit to speak to you about in your life and how God is going to use you to bring the grace of God to other people in your life. So I'd like you to stand to your feet this morning. The worship team's going to come. As they're doing that, they're not quite out here yet. Let me read you James 3 real quick. It says this, where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven, listen carefully, guys. The wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, impartial, and sincere. So whatever wisdom we think we have, that somebody or the world or whoever needs to hear, James says, here's the context in which that wisdom is given every time as a follower of Jesus. Can we remember this through November this year? That your wisdom is only good wisdom that will be recognized as wisdom from God if it is peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Otherwise, he says, don't share it. But that's what wisdom feels like. That's the context of wisdom. It may be right, but as 1 Corinthians 13 tells us, it's all wrong if it's not done with love, if it's not done in this context. So here's what I want us to do as we come to just a place of ministry. Would you close your eyes with me today? Where is God maybe speaking to you about the areas in your life right now where unity hasn't been happening? And it's so easy. I would do it, or we all would do it. We'd jump quickly to what someone else has done to us or what we think, and we'd pray to God that someone else needs to do. But no, right now, let's ask the Holy Spirit, where is unity my responsibility? Where could I just admit today, I've really drawn the battle lines over something that's non-essential? Where have I drawn the line? And even maybe you're right, maybe I'm right, but still it's my sense of pride or my sense of needing to be in control that is actually causing the division. I'm right, but I'm wrong in the way I'm going about it. And it'd be better for me to just walk in unity with someone that is clearly wrong and to show them who Jesus is and the love of Jesus than to cut them off from the source of who he is in my life to them. Where would God convict you today? It's not about somebody else. It's not about somebody else fixing it. It is the Holy Spirit speaking to you. Where can you become a peacemaker today? James 3:18, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. That peace will bring about right living, right thinking. Jesus, help us today. Lord, convict us. Forgive us, Lord, where we have not acted out of the grace that you have shown us and extended that same grace to others. Forgive us, Lord. Help us to be a church. Help us to have homes. Help us to have friendships, relationships, places of business, wherever we live, wherever we work. Lord, as people who follow you, may we make it places of peace. With your eyes still closed, one more question to anybody that's here today. Maybe this is relevant to you. You're enjoying this talk about unity, but ultimately there's something below all this. And it's because it's first, according to Scripture. That if you don't first have a relationship with God, there's no way to get to a place of unity, because your unity begins with you and the Father. And Jesus has made it possible. So there's no sense, just like it is like trying to create your own glory and trying to do things that'll just satisfy and fulfill you ultimately, and that's not possible. It's the same empty pursuit. If you try to go fix all of your relationships or try to bring unity into the different places in your life, if you don't first have unity with the Father, if you don't have unity with the one that can supply everything that you need or anything that would be taken from you, you will not walk in unity. You will be the cause of division, like many of us have been. But today, God has given you an opportunity to respond to his son, Jesus, to give you his life, to let your glory of how he made you be restored by the righteousness of Jesus, not by your own. He will take your sins, he will take your life, and he will make it new today in Jesus' name. We will have people down front here that would love to pray with you if you're ready to make that choice today. If you're online, there's people that will respond to you right now and tell you how to do that. We will walk through those steps with you. Please come down front as we close in just a couple moments and let us pray for you. Let us begin to help you see how Jesus' righteousness, his glory, is what you've been searching for all along. And you won't find it in a job, in a relationship, in a situation, in a home. You won't find it anywhere but other than in Christ. So Lord, help us today, all of us, to put our eyes back on you, to look to you for our glory. Lord, to look to you, God, for the grace that you've shown us, that we can extend that to others, that we can be people that will walk in unity, that will complete your joy and our joy. God, because when we don't have unity, Lord, it's really hard to have joy. Help us today in Jesus' name.